we saw that habits are typically built up by acts. We practice playing the piano or touch typing. We get used to it. It becomes second nature. We can do by second nature what we want to do. So these skills can be deployed when we want. We aren't forced always to be playing the piano, having learnt how to do so. And it's clear from that analogy that we sometimes will have to act out of character for a limited time in order to build up some skill. You have to do something badly before you can do it well. And that reminds us that we might well need a lot of help building up any virtue, whether it's an intellectual or a moral virtue. But there's something a bit strange about the moral virtues, because they mould our wants and desires. If by practicing acts of justice we become just, if by practicing acts of temperance we become temperate, then those virtues mean that we want to be just. We want to eat a healthy diet and not binge, and so on. So do these moral virtues in the end take us over? Are they more like those nervous tics? To understand what's going on here, we need to recognize there are two different notions of freedom. One sense of freedom that's very popular today is having a whole range of choices. It's what Servais Pankers calls freedom of indifference in his great book, The Sources of Christian Ethics. And it more or less goes with the sense that freedom is being independent of other people. They aren't interfering with you. Perhaps there lurks in people's minds a social contract theory. The ideal state is to be on a desert island, somehow miraculously provided with a mini bar and a well-stocked fridge, and we give up freedoms for the sake of the benefits of society. But that's not human. You can't come into being on a desert island with no other people, and there's a huge amount that you can't do that is fulfilling if you are by yourself. There's a different view of freedom. Freedom as responsibility, as self-possession, as ownership of yourself. What Pankers calls a freedom for excellence. The ability to put yourself wholeheartedly into what you really want, what really fulfills you, what deep down chimes with your nature, with your deepest dynamics. So Herbert McCabe spoke about telling and taking ownership of your life story, gradually building up the kind of character you really want. His book on Aquinas would be one useful thing to read on that. So building up the moral virtues, we are gradually moulding our wants, our desires, our affections, to bring them into tune with reason, so that we are liberated, able to live in the way which is truly fulfilling. We noted in the last video that the moral virtues are interconnected. It's a bit mysterious how the bootstrap program works, and Andrew Pinsent has noticed an apparent gap in Aristotle's account of becoming virtuous. You can see his paper Till We Have Faces in a book called Varieties of Virtue Ethics, edited by David Carr and some others. Aristotle doesn't really have much psychology of childhood. We train children by pain and pleasure. But in fact, there's much more going on in child development, an interaction between the child and the carer. Children are built for interaction, and it's in that context they learn their life skills. Certainly for adults, Aristotle does imply that we depend on friendship. Good people interact with each other to enhance each other's virtue, to encourage each other in becoming better. And Mark Jordan wrote a brilliant book called Teaching Bodies, in which he explored how St. Thomas's account of moral formation is in fact implicitly embedded in a whole context. He's writing, in a sense, a first-degree course on theology for people who've done their philosophy and so on, but they are living a religious life. They are celebrating the liturgy. Every year they are reading the scriptures, every week singing the psalms, celebrating the sacraments, hearing the stories of the saints. There's a whole structure of personal moral formation going on, which goes back to the apostles, whom Jesus formed personally, face to face. This study of ethics is embedded in that whole human and Christian structure of encouraging each other and receiving the grace of God so that we may be formed. It's not simply a matter that we decide by ourselves to practice some virtue as we might decide to practice the trombone. We are embedded in a whole structure which flows from the incarnate God, which forms us gently and humanely and nourishes and nurtures us in this development of the moral life. So we have to see this whole account of the acquisition of virtues by practice. We have to locate it within a much bigger implicit structure, which would have been obvious to the people St. Thomas was writing for. We are dependent on each other, and so we are vulnerable to each other in many ways, and to our wider society, and it's a structure in which grace is operative.